Okay, well, today we are talking about, we're in episode 3. Yay! So, setting boundaries with an ex, the right way to keep the peace. Is there a right way to keep the peace? I don't know. Sometimes you don't really have a choice. You can do your best. You can only maintain the peace in your own circle, but that's what we're going to talk about. So, what do you do when your ex keeps crossing boundaries? When every call or text or drop off feels like an invitation to chaos in your new home or in your blended family? So for me, it felt like no matter how clear we were, specifically with Travis's ex-partner, boundaries were just not, they just were not something that we could align. Even though they were communicated and they were put in writing, they were even agreed to. Every attempt that we did, or you did before I met you, to set a limit with your previous wife, the children of your mother, leading us to almost having to do something like there's actual applications that you can use for documenting conversations back and forth. So we've got text and email. That's where all communication must happen. Just because the toxicity in the relationship is just not worth dealing with, or bringing it in, allowing it in, I guess.
It was a little much.
It was a little.
Yeah. Dawn and I have been through this. But, we've also learned that even if they don't respect your boundaries, we can still have peace in our homes as long as we set healthy limits. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So stick with us as we unpack why boundaries feel impossible in blended families, how to know when to hold firm or when to let go, and practical ways to support your spouse through it all.
Through it all. Okay. So let's get into it. Let's talk about this. So I think, establishing boundaries with my children's father there's been issues back and forth, relatively more at the beginning of when he and I split. But by the time you and I got together with the kids, my ex-husband and I had been split up for 7 years almost, So there'd been quite a time in between there where him and I had already worked out our issues, thankfully, worked out our boundaries. And so, that has resulted, I'm very thankful in my situation with an ex-partner who is willing to still parent cooperatively, to put the best interest of the kids up front, right? But that's definitely not always the case.
No, that's not always the case. And that happens to bring my case. It feels like, okay, I'm going to give some credit to her. She is doing what she feels is the best, at least that's what I believe, for the kids. Now, the issue that I see is that she's not willing to listen to anybody else. So it's only her way or the highway. And I mean, one of the times that I'm talking about is when I caught Zach with some inappropriate material on his phone. And I tried to talk with her about that and address my concerns. And instead of coming in and communicating with me and trying to figure out how we can limit that and work together, she accused me of having all of that just basically all throughout my home. And like, she's never even been in my house. It's really frustrating.
Yeah, it is. I think, along with that, I think given the recent circumstances that have come up, that I think, we can talk about that a little bit, because that's just a whole nother aspect.
Yeah.
That being that one of our Travis's children, Winnie, has been recently diagnosed as autistic, on the higher side, but definitely still affected. And so I think that has kind of given a perspective to this that we may not have considered before. I think really in light of that, it's even more important to talk about what the boundaries look like, because you can say that you have a relationship and your relationship is toxic, but there are a plethora of reasons why the relationship is toxic. What are the actual issues around why the relationship has or cannot keep any boundaries. Obviously, you guys are divorced, or when you are getting
Right.
divorced,
Yep.
one of the reasons that happens is because you don't have good boundaries. Right?
Exactly.
It's like, oh, we get along great. Let's divorce. It's going to cost lots of
Yeah,
money. It'll be
yeah.
fun.
Let's just go ahead
do
and
it.
split up the kids and do everything.
Right.
Yeah, we're getting along great. So let's ruin everything.
Right.
So
Even in best case scenario, right? So like I had shared, my ex, Jim, has been able, and I have been able to repair our relationship to the point where it's functioning for the children. I mean, almost to the point where it's been like, we're just not a good fit. We got married really young. We got married at 20 years old. We were married for 20 years, long time. We're really good friends. But just as we grew up, we kind of grew apart, right? That situation is what you hope for. You hope for being able to get to a point where you and your ex-partner, your children's parent, can have a reasonable relationship to be able to work on behalf of the kids.
And even when you do have that, there's still times where boundaries are pushed.
What are you saying? I thought I had figured out my entire relationship with Jim. So what are you talking about there, Travis? What issues?
I feel sometimes that we get a little encroached upon, especially when it comes to finances. Because he feels like, well, he pays child support, so he doesn't have to do anything else. And me being on that same side for a number of years, I'm like, oh, no, you get to play too.
Right. And there's always, issues. Like we said, there's a reason you're not still married. You know what I mean? Like there's the reasons that you're not still together and how we got here. And so, that can range, like we just said, all the way from, okay, something happened, you're just not compatible, to this person is full on diagnosed or undiagnosed as a narcissist or some other sort of a DSM-5, thing, some diagnosis or not diagnosis. The result is there's a huge spectrum of
nice work in
reasons that you have boundary issues with an ex.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
In relation to kids. So
some of the reasons for that, though, what so I can talk about my own. Okay, why I allowed some boundaries to slip, especially when it comes to dealing with the kids. My biggest one was my guilt, and not being there for the kids. So I got turned into a Disney dad thanks to the courts, and so I was only seeing the kids like every other weekend. And so I wanted to make sure that when they came to me, I wanted to make sure that they were happy. They had a good time. There was nothing going on. So I relaxed a lot of the boundaries when it comes to discipline with the kids. And that may have actually had some kind of an impact when they went back home.
I'm sure it did.
But I didn't care. I was having fun.
Exactly, right? And so then, you again, that's an example, I think, on your side, even being self-aware and looking back on that and saying, okay, am I really placing the kids at the center of what's going on, right? It's so important to ensure that it's really about what's best for the kids. Is it best for the kids to be here? Is it best for them to be there? Do we both need to be at this event or not be at the event? Or how does that look? How does that affect our children, right? For example, okay, well, we don't, at our house, we don't allow the children to just have food all day long. There are things they can have for snacks. They can always have fruit and vegetables. That's free, totally free. But when it comes to top ramen or pizza pockets or soda, there's limitations, and you have to be like, hey, is it okay if I have Yeah, okay, it is. But that's not the case always at another parent's, at the other parent's house, the co-parent's house.
Exactly. And again, coming back to Zach and Winnie, their mother still to this day believes that that dairy affects them in a negative way. And
I venture to say that she would say that they're allergic.
Yeah, well, she started out saying that they were allergic, and then lactose intolerant, and then it's anything. But see, I've got them all tested and everything, and so I just finally said, "Yep, you know what? If you don't want to feed them dairy at your house, that is your prerogative. Stay out of my house because I have gotten the test, and I know without a doubt that dairy does not affect them in a negative way. So,
Mhm.
and then I put that boundary up. And now, regardless of what she says or anything, I'm like, yeah, okay, well, I've already got the doctor's notes. So here.
I think another thing that makes it difficult in blended families, especially if we're going to keep it to setting boundaries with an ex, right, is there's unresolved emotions. I mean, we do our best. If we're doing our best, we have ended the previous marriage. We've taken a time to reset, to think about, okay, what did I do in the relationship? What part was mine to own? What part was theirs to own? How did we get here? What do I want to do going forward? But you can't account for everything. And so as you move into the future with your new partner in a blended family, there's things that come up that are still unresolved triggers or emotions that have that affect you from your past relationship, especially when it involves your children, right?
Especially when it involves your children.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You've got a couple of those.
I do. I have a few triggers. No. So, I think boundaries are just a complicated issue anyway, right? It takes a time to figure out what your boundaries are going to be. Then it takes time and intention to enforce your boundaries. And then when you get into a blended family, you're talking about having boundaries with people you never even imagined you'd need to have boundaries with. But
Right.
I'm going to write down, or I'm going to think about how in the future I'm going to have boundaries with my husband's ex-wife. Like, you don't think about those things.
No, you don't think about it. And the other thing too is, like, you've got all these boundaries set up, and then you get into another relationship, and now you got to set new boundaries or adjust your boundaries for them and for you, because, like you said, it's all different. So I had to set up some boundaries with your family, with
not
like
so much
your
with my
sister.
ex, but more with
Your family.
Right.
And that's still kind of an ongoing thing, but I mean, it's gotten better, but it's just one of those things. And you're like, whoa, wait, we don't do that at my house. I'm like, I don't do that at my house. So
right. You have to come together as partners on your boundaries with your external family, which is a really important thing to bring up, because when we do our premarital work with couples that are coming in and families that are coming together to become a blended family, that's one of the things that we talk about.
Oh yeah,
right.
absolutely.
That's one of the things that we talk about. So just making sure that that's a foundational issue and that's addressed. Anyways, moving on from there. So when is it okay to hold the boundary versus when is it okay to let go? And everybody in the family has their own opinion about each spouse, each partner. You have your opinion. I have my opinion about when to hold firm and when to let go. So how do you address that? Because setting boundaries isn't about control. It's about creating safe space where the family can grow and thrive, and building that environment of growth. So sometimes the only boundary that you can enforce is limiting your own engagement, as far as saying, I am done with this situation. And maybe we could talk a little bit about what we just talked about.
You read my mind.
No way.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's like, so last night we had an issue that came up with my daughter, and things got a little bit heated, and Dawn was like, I am checking out of this right now. I'm not going to deal with this because this is your issue, not on mine, but looking at Winnie and saying, this is your issue to figure out, and you need to learn how to do this. And I agree 100%. This is the diagnosis of autism is very recent, but we've been talking about it for a little while. And
you mean in terms of Winnie?
Yes.
Yeah. We've known since you and I got together. It's been like, okay, so there was the suspicion that maybe that was the situation.
Right. So, but I mean, it's going back to the boundaries. You had set up the boundary of, I'm not going to be disrespected. I'm not going to deal with this kind of behavior in my house. So you removed yourself from the situation. And me being her dad, I took it upon myself to address the situation and set up other boundaries with her. Like, okay, no, this is not appropriate. You need to learn how to manage your emotions. So let's go take a walk and let's have a little conversation about how we're going to do that.
So let's think. Let's think back a little bit about one of the things that happens that I tuned into right away is, and again, the autistic diagnosis, I think, really has a lot to do with this in hindsight, is actually helpful, because when I got together with you, the amount of toxic communication between you and Sonia was horrendous. I mean, we're talking like 18, 20 emails on one subject about what time you were going to do drop off. It was ridiculous, right?
Yeah, I'd been doing that for a number of years, and it actually wasn't until I got married or started a relationship with you, that it actually even dwindled. I think you had a lot to do with that. So thank you.
Well, it's easier when, like we already established, it's easier to have boundaries when it's not your direct lawn that people are stepping on, right? So I remember I would read these emails and I'd be like, I cannot even believe that you let someone talk to you like that. That was something that that I was able, I think, like you said, to help you with, in that being on the outside, looking at the communication and saying, okay, let's separate the emotion from the actual facts. And so it was that time that you started responding to her only with facts. That's not true because of this, or A plus B equals C, or I am not going to allow you to speak to me in this way anymore.
Right. And to be fair, I mean, I had already set the boundaries of, I mean, she was the one that was just sending all the emails, and I was just like, I'm not even going to respond to this. So, but you're right, it did get a little excessive. And once I started responding with, no, that didn't happen, or, that's not true, or this is how I'm doing this, so you can either jump on board or swim.
Right. And also you used more diplomatic language.
Yes, than she did, definitely.
Yes. But I think that's a key. So setting the parameters around the communication, and I think a lot of couples in these sorts of toxic relationships get it right to where, they limit communication to only text or only email or anything that can be documented. I think that's a good start. But really, I think it's also more about approaching the communication simply as communication, and separating yourself from the emotionality of it.
For toxic relationships, absolutely. Now, for other like, for instance, you and Jim, when he starts acting out a little bit, you're like, "Oh, Jim, shut up! Just shut up and sit down." And he's like,
yes.
"Oh, yeah, that's right."
Right.
And
right.
then you can talk with him about it.
Now, to be fair, I don't say those words precisely. I mean, we were together for 20 years and we got married young, like I said. So,
right. That's the communication that comes across.
But it's kind of like, okay, this is the situation and this is how it's going to happen on my side. You're free to do whatever it is that you'd like to do, but this is how I'm going to approach this situation. But thankfully, in that relationship, it doesn't come up very often. Right.
Not very often at all.
Definitely not a toxic type. I mean, it's annoying to deal with,
right? But it's not.
But it's not toxic, right? So I think separating that and being able to hold firm is really looking at those emails and texts, like we said, as directly as communication, which means a lot of times taking a break. I mean, I can't even remember so many times that I'd be like, I can't read it. So I had to, at that, have to be like, I'm checking out. This is not mentally or emotionally good for me, because I'm now spending so much energy focused on what's going on in this relationship that I am not even a part of. Right.
Right.
So I have to be like, whoa, come back to center. This is not your circle.
Right. Right. Exactly. And that's one of those things too, that I had already pretty much established.
Right.
You've read some of the emails that I wrote, but I never sent.
Yes, many of
So,
those, right?
so that's I would get an email and it would trigger me out, and I would just blast, blast out a response right away, and then I would sit on it. I
Yes.
would let it sit overnight,
Yeah.
and then I'd go back to it, and I most of the time I actually just deleted the whole thing
Right.
and rewrote it in a respectful and communicative manner.
Which still
So,
sometimes garnered
oh
horrible
yeah,
responses. But
sometimes,
yes, not okay.
yes,
It's been
right,
better. So
yes,
in any case, I think that's a good point too, is just taking that time, even if it's a couple days, to be like, okay,
absolutely.
I need to detach myself from this. And also knowing that part of the issue, part of the draw to toxic relationships is that the adrenaline is rushing because it feels like everything has to be solved right now. And that is not the case. It does not
No,
have to be solved right now. So your emotions get spun up and then you're like, oh my God. And then it's just saying, no, this factually, is anything going to change in the next 3 hours if I don't respond? No.
right, and that's what thing I when I'm coaching couples, I tell them there are very few things that have to be decided
Yeah.
right now. That unless it's an emergency, you can take your time and take a breath and sit back and just think about this, and okay, this is how we need to respond.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Travis. And I mean, I think we'll talk about that more in other episodes, but I totally agree with you that mindset of this is not all happening right now. Like the world is not ending this moment if I don't respond to this, or if I put it on the shelf and I go forward, as long as you don't leave it there.
Right.
Then it'll come
leave
back.
it there.
But
Right.
don't leave it there.
It'll fall off and explode.
It will. It's not good. So when is a time to let things go?
That's a good question. So, well, when it's a relatively minor thing, like, okay, I'm 5 minutes late dropping the kids off, and she puts me on blast, and I just don't even respond. It's like, yeah, okay, 5 minutes. Traffic, rain, whatever. If I'm going to be more than 10 minutes late at a drop-off point, I will text her or let her know, hey, running late, da-da-da. She hasn't even done that since I've stopped responding.
Absolutely. That's part of the key, right? Like what we just said.
Right.
It's like, okay, is this even worth a response, or is it just going to result in a spin up? You know what I mean? So I think, what you're saying is like when it's not a big deal. Now, the issue with that though, Trav, is that it's a big deal to her that you're 5 minutes late. So it's more than, I guess, about owning that. Is that my issue? Is that my issue to own? No, it's hers. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think something that helps me with that, not just in relationship, co-parenting, but in life, is looking at something and saying, okay, is this really going to matter in 5 years? Like 5 years from now, is this thing going to still eat me up? Do you know what I mean? Am I going to care that whatever happened? And so I think a good example in with my kids was being flexible around whose time it was. And it goes back to keeping the kids at the center. And again, as we've said, that's easier done with some past relationships than it is with others. But if you can keep the children's best interest at heart, then it makes it easier to make those decisions. So what I'm trying to get at is, okay, well, Caleb has a baseball tournament, but it's my weekend or it's my week or whatever. And baseball is something him and his dad have together. It's something that they bond over. So am I going to pitch a big fit that I can't have him on my time? Am I going to be like, this is my time? It says in the parenting plan, it's my time. You know what I mean?
Right.
So no, I'm going to be like, what's best for Caleb? It's like, I guess it's looking at it and being like, okay, how about the parents be parents?
Yeah, and the kids be kids.
And the kids be kids. So let's not, as parents, act like children.
Right.
Instead,
And
let's
not
parent.
force the kids to act like adults.
Right, exactly, right? Because that's something that's an example of, that's not Caleb's problem. He didn't ask for me and his dad to divorce. He
No.
was not part of that equation. He didn't say, hey, could you guys split up so this would be difficult for me and I can live in 2 separate houses?
Yeah, I mean, that's what all kids think, right? I mean, they just love to have the 2 separate houses.
Oh, yeah,
and
they
the
love
separate
it.
rules and different. Yeah,
No. So I think that's part of it is, when to let things go when it's really not about the kids.
Right. So how do you support spouses when we're struggling? I can think, just going back with the Caleb and baseball thing. If I remember correctly, one of his last games was 8 hours away.
Yeah.
And I think it was actually supposed to be your weekend. We were talking about that, and we're like, hey, let's go. So we packed up and we drove and we supported Caleb.
Yes.
And we weren't worrying too much about whose time was whose or anything like that. We were there for Caleb.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then that, I think, has also been a way. I know we're talking about supporting our spouse. I think one of the ways, at least that I've found, and maybe this is just unique to me because my situation isn't toxic, is just keeping the conversation on the kids, right? When we went to that ball game, it was you and me and your kids and Kaya, and we all went over. And I was like, yeah, look, he's doing this, he's doing that, he's doing awesome. And it really then is a way to support and love the kids.
Exactly.
Despite the problems. You just got to check it at the door.
Yeah. So I think supporting the spouse comes down to supporting the kids a lot of the time. But then there's times where things just get frustrating and you don't know how to move forward or how to do anything because the situation is so toxic.
Yes. So we can talk. I mean, so we have the flip side, right? I'm like, oh yeah, everything with my ex is great. I mean, it's not, but you know what I mean? It's
compared to mine.
Compared to some relationships that are out there, I'm extremely blessed with my kids' dad. Okay.
Right.
He's very supportive of me and what I do, and he's supportive of the kids. And you know, there's minor issues. So in the big scheme of
in the big scheme of things. There's always going to be little things, but
especially though where you do have relationships where there's all sorts of parental alienation going on, where there is talking behind the parents' back to the kids, using the kids as messengers, putting the kids in the middle, trying to get back at it and saying, this is my time, you can't, or whatever. It has nothing to do with the children whatsoever. Right. And that has been the situation.
Yes. It's been that situation
for your kids'
several
mom,
times.
for Zach and Winnie's mom.
Many
times. More times than I care to remember, to the point where the authorities have been involved multiple times.
Yes. And even then, just on for instance, when they had a school event like a Christmas pageant, and during the break or even beforehand and everything, they'd catch their eye and wave at them, and they'd wave back, and then afterwards, I would go down and give them a hug and say, hey, good job. And then I'd get an email saying that I was attempting to abduct them or run away with them from the thing, and I shouldn't be distracting them during the performance. And I mean, it was just so mind-blowing.
It was.
I didn't even know how to. I was like, what are you talking about?
I know.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as supporting you, I mean, you do a great job of supporting me. I mean, I married a therapist, so I got the good thing, right? Like, and I know you're not a licensed therapist, and we didn't go down that route on purpose.
No, on purpose. Have,
right? So, but you are educated and certified. So you know what I mean? Let's see here. So I think as far as me supporting you, like we shared that, I was able to help create separation between the communication, emails and texts, or emails mostly, that were coming over, and be like, okay, stop. This isn't, is this, let's talk about this, Travis. Is this
Mhm.
worth a response, right? Is this worth getting into? Is it a actual issue that has anything to do with the children whatsoever that you can do anything about?
Right. Yeah. You have helped me out many times on that. And you helped me limit things down to, well, one word answers, or just, a couple words like, that's not true. And then that's the response.
I think another thing is saying, okay, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How, after that interaction and after the authorities have had to show up at the kids' mom's house again, and you have had to talk to them on the phone and you are not able to be there, just that check-in of like, okay, how are you doing? Talk to me, Ghost. Tell me what's happening, right?
Debrief each other, like sit down and we
That's
do
probably
that.
the more male term for that. I'm just going to say, I mean, debrief. The women are like, you mean cry it out? Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, but we just sit down and we check in. We are like, okay, are you centered? Are you grounded? If you're not, what do we need to do to get you there?
Mm-hmm.
And you did a wonderful job with that too, just keeping me grounded and bringing me back down. Especially, I mean, there were times crying it out. I cried, literally cried on your shoulder because I was so frustrated and upset with what was happening.
I think another thing that we used that has been really helpful for me, especially when we have the kids. This doesn't happen as much as it used to, but the kids were here and they would have their mom on speakerphone. Okay. So now we're in the car and we're stuck in the car, all of us.
That was really stressful for you, wasn't it?
It was very stressful for me, very stressful because I could not, and we've talked about this, and it's probably not a good time to get into that either, but maybe remind me to go back around to the whole, protecting the nest thing. Right. But I'm trying to maintain community, culture in our blended family in the car along with you, right? Where we have this going on. And that specific thing where the toxicity and the manipulation with the kids is coming into the environment, and it just shifts the whole energy. It would be a mess. I didn't say a thing. No. I kept very quiet and was supportive and was like, oh, it's great that you were talking to your mom. That's awesome. Right.
Yep. Yeah. But inside.
So I would be like, okay. I think I remember we talked about it several times about no speakerphone. Can't do the speakerphone. Yep. And so, but I think when we were first starting that, one of the things I would do is just like I put my finger up, or I'd be like no, right? I didn't have to say a thing. Right. And then you would know that was the signal for them to be like, hey, could you guys go ahead and turn off the speakerphone?
And that was one of the things. So like in the car, even it was like that was one of those boundaries that we set up. Is like, okay, if your mom calls you or you call your mom, that's fine, but don't be it on the speaker. We don't need to hear everything that she has to say.
Right. That conversation with you guys is private, right? Like, I think that's how we put it. We're like, that's a private conversation between you and your mom, or you guys and your mom. And so, that's better for you to do on the phone, not on speaker. Right. So I think the key point here is that boundaries aren't just about keeping the negativity out. They're more so about protecting the environment and space and the culture of your blended family home.
Absolutely. Yeah. We got to protect ourselves, protect that community that you're building.
Right. Because it's a whole different deal when you're building a blended family. It has to be so much more intentional when you're looking at what you're going to let in and what you're not going to let in. You know what I mean? Because you want to foster, if you can, a good relationship between your kids and the other parent.
Right.
And their other parent.
Absolutely.
Right? Absolutely.
And maybe I got my fingers crossed. Maybe keeping these boundaries up will facilitate the kids having a good relationship with their mother. I hope so. I don't think I will ever have a good relationship with her. But that's her decision, not mine. So
Right. And we acknowledge, obviously, that you and I are two opposite sides of the spectrum. So we kind of have the full circle of like, it can be great, it can be wonderful, and oh my God, run. You know what I mean? So I think, that's good to know that we have the full spectrum of what does it look like with boundaries.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, it's hard. Boundaries they suck sometimes, especially having them is good. Enforcing them is not always fun. It's definitely not with your kids, not with your ex, not with your partner,
not with anyone.
Not with anyone, really.
So yeah, if you're struggling, set boundaries with an ex. You're definitely not alone. We all do it. Don and I've been through it, but we've come out stronger. Boundaries just aren't about keeping things out. They're about keeping family safe, like we've gone over before. Keep this family safe so they can thrive, so that culture that you're building is healthy and safe and for everyone.
Yep. So, we would definitely love to hear from you. What's the toughest boundary that you've had to set? Share your story with us, because we are all in this together. The saga continues on our side, and so does the the good parts. It's all life.
Absolutely,
it's all life. So, we're all in this together. So share your story with us, and you can do that by doing what?
Well, you could download the Blended Family Resource Guide at our website, which is blendedpathways.com. You could go to our Facebook page, join our Blended by Design group, connect with other remarried couples, and just reach out. Send us an email.
Yep. We are definitely trying to make this into a community, right? So community where we can share together, because there is no easy answer to blending families. It's all in the doing, in the practice, over and over and over and over.
And over.
So, all right. Well, I think that's it, guys. Appreciate it.
All right.
Yep. Talk to you next week.
Talk to you later.